So in this few minutes that were given to talk about this subject, I realized I had a terrible dilemma, which was I could read you 36 great small poems happily in this amount of time, and yet to try to say something about how very small poems work takes much longer. And I think there is something instructive in that in itself, which is the seemingly impossible meaning per moment ratio that good poems can hold, and the opulence of opportunity and feeling in every word or phrase in a good poem, even in a punctuation mark. So this isn't a poet, but I'm going to pull in Isaac Babel's marvelous statement: "Nothing can pierce the heart as icily as a period placed rightly." So, every poem, including the Iliad, long poems, short poems, they all have this quality of meaning that extends past the perimeter of what is said, which has been so gorgeously elucidated by both Toy and Carl. And I have to say, The Act is one of my favorite poems. D.H. Lawrence's White Horse also. I just love hearing these coming up independently from others. One of the ways that this extending past the perimeter works is that there is a kind of, especially in very short poems, a detonation, a working out of instability, an active initiation, the continuance of ripple. And what this means is that the poem might be very small, but the field of its unfolding is you. It is your whole life. It is your whole knowledge of life and death, of love and loss, of tenderness, of indignation, of facts, of injustice and justice. Every realm of us is pulled into comprehending these poems. So we are like the lake that a very short poem is dropped into, and the ripples of its meaning actually take place in us. The pebble is the words, and we are the field, and those rings become as big as the rings of Saturn. And I think what is so startling about the power of very short poems is that their capacity to foment large feeling is in part made by their own smallness. And I talked to my scientist cohort to try to get an understanding of physics for you to bring in here. So this is all a little overcompressed. But in the physical world, the tighter the bond, the greater the force released when it is broken. And energy is flung outward by its release. A cosmologist friend, when I asked him if he could say a few words about this, he said, the universe began at a size smaller, much smaller than an atom, and as it expanded, it's made its own space. Now, I don't really know what that means, but metaphorically, I think poems make their own space in us. They make worlds in us. And in every case, physically, what makes the fuel in the physical sense is compressed energy. In the poetic sense, it is compressed emotion and comprehension and understanding that comes from our whole lives. And what does seem to spring it forward into this experience that feels like poems to us is some kind of instability, wrongness, unsustainable compression meeting the tap of events on our lives. And the poem is the attempt to find a new state of being that is able to hold all of this in its rearrangement. I have always loved Galway Kinnell's statement that the title of every good poem might be tenderness. The title of every good poem might also be presence. And it is our presence which allows small poems to work in us in this way. It is our presence which allows them to make this space in which statement, image, gesture, arc can all happen so briefly and awaken in us our awe, our fierceness, our tenderness, our tears. Part of how this is done, which Carl alluded to, is a kind of confoundingness. If you look closely at good poems, they are holding things which are impossible to say and impossible to hold. They are recipes for something. I think Toy used the word evaporative, and the knowledge of good poems is evaporative. It can only be refound by reading the poem again. And so they are desperate and beautiful contradictory statements of things we can't hold, like, I am going to die and the world is beautiful. You know, it is almost impossible to hold those two thoughts at the same time. Good poems do it all the time. The act does that. So